Some people across the country are concerned, prudently, about an approaching storm. 3 years ago, as the President had noted on the first anniversary of the pandemic declaration, we were hit with a virus that was met with silence and spread unchecked. After that, months of discord about the coronavirus epidemic have transformed the cloth mask into a potent political symbol, touted by Democrats as a key part of communal responsibility, labeled by some GOP leaders as a sign of government overreach and as a scarlet letter pinned on the weak. And, now, with new subvariant strains, Morris Brown College in Atlanta, Lionsgate Studios in Santa Monica, and California-based healthcare facility Kaiser Permanente reinstated its mask mandate at its facilities in Santa Rosa, California last week, amid an uptick in patients testing positive, while in New York, a group of hospitals also imposed mask mandates, including United Health Services, Auburn Community Hospital and University Hospital in Syracuse, New York. Former United States Surgeon General Jerome Adams, who served in former President Donald Trump's administration, recently weighed in on discussions surrounding the possible return of mask mandates in certain settings due to the arrival of new COVID-19 variants. And, Dr. Anthony Fauci may have stepped down as President Biden's top medical advisor, but he's still calling on Americans to mask up this winter if COVID cases skyrocket. The best way to address a risk is to develop a clear understanding, or picture, of the threat, and, perhaps the best way for most to comprehend complex materials is to visualize a concept with a graphical image. So, think of respiratory illnesses as a rainstorm, and, as Dr. Lindsay Seek-Ma, at Virginia Tech, had explained in July 2020 in the New York Times, it is in the air, just like raindrops in a rainstorm, and, when it begins to rain, what do you do to protect yourself? If you are like most people, who may don a raincoat, maybe even resort to putting on some galoshes or rain shoes, you may have noticed something about the non-porous coverings that are used to repel water, and at least scientists would describe this characteristic as a material that is hydrophobic, because it provides a simple barrier to prevent the raindrops from coming into contact with your body. And, when it comes to facial coverings and respiratory protection, the N95 and other medical-grade protection possesses this quality, and is described as hydrophobic, and since the same materials that repel the water, and prevent a breakthrough infection, would also effectively block the air, medical-grade protection is equipped with a filtering device, or respirator, that serves the purpose of filtering out contaminants that may be harmful. Otherwise, it would be like putting a plastic bag over your head in a rainstorm, potentially posing a threat of asphyxiation, which would not be a reasonably calculated solution, creating a new threat to prevent another. Let's consider this while using the example of an N95, equipped with a respirator. The largest SARS-CoV-2 particle measures about 1.4 microns, contained in droplets, that may be expelled in breathing, talking, coughing or sneezing, and to get a good picture of the size of a micron, you could fit about 750 microns within the space of a period, in 12-point font, on a standard sheet of paper, so, it is very small. However, in May 2021, the CDC had advised that the primary means of transmission for COVID-19 is through fine particles, or aerosols, which measure between 0.25 and 0.50 microns. So, the protectiveness provided by medical-grade protection, like an N95, would depend on how effective the respirator is at filtering out those particles that will be inhaled, which should be a factor to consider, because an N95, equipped with a respirator, will provide medical-grade protection against 95% of contaminants measuring larger than 0.3 microns, which means that the N95 will not be able to provide protection against the fine particles or aerosols that measure only 0.25 microns, because they are too small. While that may be concerning, there is not immediate cause to despair and fall into panic, because not only is getting the virus a function of coming into contact with the virus, but also how much virus to which a person is exposed in what scientists describe as infectious dose. However, unfortunately, even 3 years into a pandemic, according to the CDC, the infectious dose for COVID-19 remains unknown. So, there is potential in this rainstorm for getting wet by these smaller particles for a person wearing medical grade protection, which is wholly distinct from non-medical grade facial coverings, like bandanas, scarves, and other substitute materials. In military force protection, initial entry soldiers are taught to distinguish between that which is cover, or that which provides effective protection from small arms fire, and that which is concealment, or that which only conceals you from the view of your adversary. And, even in a rainstorm, try as you might, you cannot avoid being wet by attempting to prevent the rain from seeing you. Further, even the N95 has additional limits regarding the risks attendant to prolonged exposure and degrading of the protective capabilities of that medical grade device, for it will only remain effective against a contaminant, like tear gas, for about an hour, and the CDC has confirmed that the aerosols, or fine particles for COVID-19, can persist in the air for hours, even after a source, like an infected person, shedding viral load, has departed the area. Intelligence drives the mission cycle. And, unlike metadata analysis, which uses deductive reasoning, derived from observational studies, which may present coincidental correlation, but do not necessarily establish causation, this brainstorming process is an exercise in inductive reasoning and inference, wherein we have assembled the known facts, from which we are better enabled to develop informed assumptions that can later be validated or invalidated to improve our understanding of the risks and to develop a clearer threat picture that will facilitate development of a reasonably calculated solution to prevent or mitigate the harm. Now, equipped with this methodological process, let us consider non-medical grade facial coverings as substitute for medical grade protection, devices like bandanas, scarves and other porous materials, which scientists would describe as not hydrophobic, but hydrophilic, because rather than repel water, like these rain droplets, they absorb water, and often facilitate rapid evaporation, trapping the contaminants on the material, which may later, when experiencing sufficient force, become dislodged from the cloth, causing a potential for harm to others, or even the wearer. Under the laws of inertia, an object stays at rest, and will remain at rest, until acted upon by an unbalanced force, and there is no reason to believe that a virus coming into contact with just simple cloth will defy Newtonian physics. It's like a science, and, while no viable SARS-CoV-2 particle has yet been recovered from a nasopharyngeal swab longer than 5 days, the CDC, early in the pandemic, had recovered viable particles aboard the cruise ship Diamond Princess that had remained viable on certain surfaces in the cabins of passengers up to 17 days after the cabins had been vacated. No reasonable person would go out in the rain and not expect to get wet without a hydrophobic umbrella or raincoat. So, ask yourself if a reasonable person would suggest that the protection provided by an N95, a hydrophobic, medical-grade device, was equivalent to the protection provided by a hydrophilic, non-medical grade facial covering, like a bandana. If one were to subject both to a challenge study, would you feel sufficiently assured to volunteer for exposure to live, wild virus, when wearing anything other than medical grade protection, equipped with a respirator? Would it make a difference if, based upon metadata analysis, some scientists had found some coincidental correlations that suggested that non-medical grade substitutes may be effective? Does it make a difference that those observational studies were based upon observations of persons like yourself, who had been volunteered to participate in a clinical trial, and who had been potentially exposed to a virus to obtain those results? Do raindrops keep falling on your head, just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed? You look like an intelligent person, just singing and dancing in the rain.
This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest.